Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Deep In Coffee Hour. I'm your host, Neil Sisson, and I am thrilled to have you join us today for our New Look show, now streaming live to more destinations than you have fingers on one hand. Whether you're a long-term listener or just discovering us for the first time, we would love it if you would connect with our community. You can follow the show on X at Deep In Coffee Hour, or we broadcast live through the Havelo account as well at Havelo Official, or simply hit the follow, like, and/or subscribe button wherever you are tuning in from today. So that's the best way to stay up to date with all of our latest episodes and what is going on as we explore the future of decentralization. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that underpins pretty much everything in Web3 and Web2, and that is data. So with me today, I have Brian from URnetwork and Kemp from R.io and Jinx from Pocket Network. Welcome, gentlemen. How are we all doing today?
Good morning. Good.
Morning.
Yeah, morning. Great. Thanks for having us, Neil.
Yeah. I guess we usually just start with if everybody goes around and just gives a little bit of a taster of your backstory. Maybe just tell us how you got into the world of decentralization and just a brief touch on what you're working on now, and then we'll double click into everything. So, Brian, if you want to go first, and then Kemp, and then Jinx.
Yeah. Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me on.
Sure.
So we started URnetwork 2 years ago. It's three of us. We have three co-founders, and our goal is to replace the traditional VPN with something that's more transparent and more accessible. We think that privacy is a human right that everyone should have available. We think there's a transformation that needs to happen in the privacy space, which is similar to going from something like SMS to text over IP. We think there should be a protocol or protocols that are widely available and easy to integrate and that anyone can participate in, that are completely open source and transparent. And that's what we're pursuing at URnetwork, is building out that protocol, and also on the business side, integrating that with various partners, and as well as offering a premium consumer VPN.
So when you say transparent about the messaging, do you mean, because privacy obviously and transparency are not necessarily, they could be opposites, but maybe not. So maybe you could just explain that a little bit more. How does transparency fit?
Yeah. So we think it's kind of silly, like when you use a privacy product, the best guarantee you can get today is someone saying like, this has been audited by someone out there in the world. So it's like a lot of these privacy products are like, yeah, we've been audited by this random company. We think privacy and security should be completely open source and reproducible, so that you can see what's running, how your data is being handled. You can contribute to it. You can actually own it. And so that's what I mean by transparency, which is that the protocols are strong enough and hard enough that they can exist out in the open for the community, and they still work properly.
Right, gotcha. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into that because here in the EU, it feels like the politicians are pushing very hard to essentially steal us, to deprive us of any ability to have privacy, and all in the name of fear, which is a playbook that, let's face it, worked very well for COVID. So irrespective of what you believe about the conspiracy theory side of that, I think it's fairly well established that governments around the world used fear as a mechanism to get what they wanted. Mass control, I suppose, was what happened. Whether you agree with whether it was necessary or not, I think we can all agree that is what actually happened. Kemp, thanks, Brian. I'm looking forward to diving into some more with that. Kemp, do you want to walk us through RIO?
Yeah, for sure, man. And I completely resonate with you as a UK citizen of all of this stuff that's happening in the UK and the EU. It's terrible, man. It's relentless, non-stop. It's bad news after bad news at the moment. But so I'm Kemp. I started my career kind of building technology teams in London. And then I taught myself how to code because building technology teams was fun, but kind of actually building the stuff I found was a lot more interesting, like I was missing out. So I kind of naturally then transitioned into sort of software engineering and kind of stumbled into crypto. I played around with it a little bit when I was sort of early on in my life, but I was following a very well-known DevRel called Nader Dabit. He's now at Eigenlayer, and just kind of followed his path from React into crypto, and then actually ended up helping him found quite a large developer community in crypto called Developer DAO, which interestingly does run both an URnetwork gateway and a Pocket Network gateway. And then for the last year or so, I transitioned over to work for URnetwork as head of ecosystem. So basically getting to know everyone, founders, figuring out what they're building, helping them build on our stack. So URnetwork is called the first permanent cloud network. Essentially what it does is it is decentralizing the storage, indexing, and access layer of permanent data stored on Arweave. So our team have a long history of running, and we still do run most of the like centralized upload and download infrastructure for Arweave. So we have a big high availability upload service called Turbo, which handles about 95% of the traffic. And then we also run Arweave.net. So if anyone here has ever used Arweave, they probably used Arweave.net to get data. We still run those. They're still predominantly what is used, but the network is an effort to decentralize that whole stack. It's all open source. And we think this is really, really important because there are lots of decentralized storage protocols out there, but no one's really decentralized the access layer, right? You have IPFS kind of has to a degree, but there's no incentive around it. And kind of a lot of these up and coming networks, that kind of layer of it is just centralized, right? So we think it's really, really important, both kind of the permanent data construct, especially within Deepin and AI, and also having that decentralized access layer where you know that you will be able to access data even if kind of the centralized services go offline.
Right. Very good. Yeah, we had you guys on the show a couple of weeks ago, I think a few weeks ago, and it's a very interesting project. We'll be talking probably about you again in another few weeks when I do the future of the space with Bradley from Deepin Connection. But anyways, more on that later. Thank you, Kemp. Great to meet you. Jinx, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And it sounds like Kemp and I should be talking a little more, I think, given that Pocket Network, we are the world's first fully permissionless, fully decentralized open data delivery network. So I think we could probably add another supporting layer to Ario with just a slight bit of tweaking. I'm an old school cypherpunk. I've been posting on the bulletin board since the late 90s. I'm a huge proponent of privacy and decentralization and permissionless decentralization in particular. I think if it's not permissionless, then it's really just distributed computing, and that's not really hitting the ball, so to speak. We've been working a lot on building a coalition of decentralized services that want to work together to build a full Web3 stack that's sort of a one-stop shop. And I think that, you know, finding other people who believe the same things that we do is key to that. So happy to be here as always.
Yeah, well, happy to have you. It's great to have, I love it when we have like OG people on who really understand not just the tech, because I feel like that's interesting, but everything happens so fast in this space that if you're only in it a little while, the depth of knowledge that you have about how we got to where we are is a different thing. So yeah, delighted to have you back. Just on the just on that thing about permissionless and, you know, decentralization, do you feel like we're going as an industry? Do you feel like, I mean, obviously you're working towards it with Pocket, but do you feel as an industry we're going in the right direction, or do you feel like the incumbents, the GCPs and the AWS and whoever else, and there's 7 of them or whatever, you know, are they just data is oil, right? So do you feel like it's just too entrenched and they're just too big, or are we making progress?
I mean, somebody told me that when you watch Star Wars, you root for Luke, but when you vote for the Empire. And I have seen this sort of play out over and over and over again. And I mean, October was the shining moment when everyone in DeFi should have been looking at their own stacks. What an embarrassment to be a DeFi platform who was down hard repeatedly in the last month of October because you rely on a single centralized compute provider. I mean, it's just extraordinary that Web3 has been around for around 5 years now. And we still have all of these people who are doing the old school thing of go hit AWS, spin up a container, spin up a stack, fire up some Lambdas, and build a decentralized finance platform. I mean, come on. It's really just it shows how the emperor has no clothes in Web3 right now, and it really, I think, strongly differentiates those of us who truly build for decentralized, people who are using that as a brand name on top. There is the absolute ability right now to build a full stack application from top to bottom on entirely permissionless and decentralized protocols. And people just aren't doing that to a meaningful degree, especially the big names.
Right. What would that look like? Let's say somebody was building it with Pocket Network. What would actually that stack look like? What would they need? Are we talking about needing to have a bunch of different services like Arweave, like RIO, like Pocket, and tie them all together through some heavy dev, or is it as easy as it is today on AWS?
So when I talk about building a full, Web3 full stack setup, that's exactly what we're doing. Is we're pulling together partnerships with other Web3 providers and working on a unified interface that can give you an AWS type experience, but using all decentralized providers. And I think that that's really what it comes down to. And honestly, it makes sense not just for engineers, it also makes sense for ecosystem participants, because everyone who's out there staking nodes or setting up infrastructure for these decentralized networks generally have a fairly high level of inefficiency in their stack. That's why we talk about the decentralization tax, right? So if I'm running bare metal for Pocket Network, there's no reason that I shouldn't be running an REO access point and maybe running the URnetwork node structure. Apologies, I don't really know a lot about your architecture yet. But there are a number of these services that if I'm already participating in one ecosystem, why not participate in all of them and contribute to that swarm? Makes the most efficient use of my own hardware and helps deliver that sort of unified all-in-one experience for engineers themselves while using a fully permissionless and fully decentralized stack. I mean, to me, that is the cypherpunk dream.
Yeah, no doubt. I completely agree with you as far as the decentralization and permissionless side of things goes. I think that's just essential. All right. Coming back to you, Brian. Where are you guys based? Is it do you have a center in Europe? Are you finding it hard in Europe at the moment with the legislation side of things and that push seemingly?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. So no. We're a US company. We've felt being a US company has been an asset to us because we feel like we understand the legal framework in the US pretty well, and it generally translates favorably internationally. We are a distributed team, so we have members in Japan. One of the co-founders is in Japan. We have two of the other people in the US. And we run our operations as a federated network. So we're not fully decentralized, I guess, as you would probably describe it. As Jinx was saying, we think of ourselves as a federated network. So we're a network of network operators, very similar to the internet structure. And so for us, we run one of the network operators, the biggest one, and we have operations in Sweden as well as in the US and California. And so that's our current base.
Okay. So is it, I mean, with a lot of these things, is the goal to try and expand globally? I feel like with a lot of messaging protocols, that seems to be what happens, with the exception of some places, obviously, like, China and places where they want to control the market and there's just incumbents that you can't compete with. Is the goal there to get broader, or are you happy enough just to stay in the States?
Absolutely. So I think there's a difference between user base and the operating structure. So from an operating structure perspective, we want to expand the network operators to a global federated set. So we think we want to work with partners who are running their own networks that are kind of peered with everyone. From a user perspective, we're already global. So we have users in over 100 countries, participating in over 100 countries. We have over 3,000 cities online. And so we are a edge network with, I think, at the moment, over 60,000 IPs on the network. One of the topics that has been really interesting for us to explore is this topic of fear. For us, we spent a lot of time on safety and how do we make it safe for people to participate from various regions of the world. It's actually a really challenging problem. And I think it's one of the problems that people hold up as to why, decentralized privacy networks can't work or can't scale is there's a lot of, fear about it. But we've put a lot of effort into working with the research community, working with even understanding, what's best practice from the pioneers in the space, such as Tor and other networks, to come up with an approach that we think is actually scalable and also fits within the proper sort of legal framework that, we think we're building something that's legitimate, that can work with legitimate companies. And so that's been I think an asset for us being based in the US is we've been able to go really deep on the laws and form an opinion about how we fit. We're also looking at other countries, especially like EU, and figuring out how we fit there too as well. But we think that our general position translates to pretty much every country where VPNs are legal.
So just so that everybody who's listening understands where you fit in terms of the market, in terms of market positioning. Are you guys like trying to compete with Tor and by creating a new essentially internet protocol for like data and voice or messaging, or is it more like the signal protocol where they, where it's chat and that kind of side of things, or could it potentially be everything? And just maybe walk people through that.
Yeah, we're not trying to be broad. We're trying to be very focused. We're trying to replace VPN. Okay. We kind of say goodbye VPN. It's kind of jokingly, we're a VPN, so it's not. We don't mean like no more VPNs. What we mean is the traditional VPN, the free VPN that's run by some company you don't know who it is, that we want to replace that. We think we have a really nice model where you can actually get our product for free if you participate. We think that that's a model that really only makes sense for Web3, and it's almost a unique strength of Web3 that you can get products by participation, and that opens up a lot more users into legitimate products. We think we also want to compete directly with the biggest consumer VPNs. We think we have a better product, just numbers to numbers. We think it's a better product. We are also looking at any product that wants private data or private access to the internet. There's a number of use cases in AI, in enterprise, where privacy is important. And so we think of ourselves as sort of like a plugin SDK, sort of like various companies have made Postgres a drop-in replacement, or there's a bunch of examples of this, but we think of ourselves as sort of a drop-in for networking. So if you want a private network integrated into your product, you can drop us in, and that's really what we're focused on.
All right, cool. Thank you. Kemp, we talked about I understand the now again, I think one of my strengths in this role of having these conversations is I'm not a developer. Now I can code a little bit, and I'm also not afraid to ask stupid questions, which I think is useful for most average people, because sometimes these conversations get really technical, and my inner nerd rejoices, but sometimes it goes a little bit over my head. And one particular area is this idea of permanent storage. And I get how you can have something permanently stored. Obviously, that makes perfect sense. What I don't understand is how that works at a economic level, let's say, right? Because maybe it's just because I've just been paying for Google Drive and iCloud and all these types of personal services for too many years to to be able to sort of disassociate that kind of recurring payment model with the things that I want to keep, like photos or whatever. So maybe you could explain that for the folks out there who are tuned in and just want to understand how data works in a Web3 permanent landscape.
Love to. You're probably unsurprised. This is the first question we always get, right? Like, how is this possible? I'm so used to paying subscriptions. This is like just a ridiculous thing to claim.
Right.
So Arweave is like a layer 1 storage protocol, right? You can think of it like Bitcoin, but for data. The only thing the storage protocol cares about is storing data for a very long time, right? It doesn't try and solve for like access control or encryption and decryption. It's just a super dumb, think of it like S3, put anything you want there and we'll keep it for a really long time. So it's made efficient around that sole problem of permanent data storage or long-term data storage. So how it actually achieves that is every item of data that is uploaded to Arweave, the transaction fee is split. So part of that goes to the miners to mining the transaction, and then part of it goes into a protocolized endowment. So it's like a fund that lives within the protocol. Excuse me. And that fund is there to ensure and reward miners for storing data for a very, very long time. And how the kind of algorithm of the protocol works is when you store a piece of data, the miner must store that data with a reference to 2 other pieces of data, right? And then that system ensures that in order for the miners to earn rewards, they need to be showing and proving that they're still storing old data. And then the endowment fund that I mentioned is kind of like that insurance fund, if you will, where it sits there and makes sure to fund miners over time. And how that is calculated is it's a decreasing cost curve that's linked to the underlying cost of storage, the hardware, like a SSD or thumb drive you would have, but it's a very pessimistic calculation. So it predicts that the cost of storage is going to go down a lot slower than it actually is. So it was calculated at 200 years, but if we continue to see that kind of speed of reduction in cost of storage, then it should last quite a lot longer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. But I guess I suppose then the follow-up question to that would be kind of around like, what are the data limits? Because, you know, obviously you mentioned Bitcoin, like the amount of data stored there would be quite small compared to if you're trying to store the other example you used, which is S3, where you may be storing like years of video and stuff like that, where they're just in different worlds in terms of the amount of space required.
Yeah, the Bitcoin analogy does sometimes send folks the wrong way in thinking. So, my bad. The analogy was more that like Bitcoin does one thing, right? It's just a store of value. That's all it is. Doesn't care about anything else. Doesn't have smart contracts. So that's the point that I was trying to make about Arweave. Is all it cares about is you give me data and I'll hold on to it for a very long time. So there are 2 types of transactions in Arweave. There's a layer 1 transaction, which is you can kind of upload like direct to network, and then there was a change to the protocol that allows bundling. And essentially what this allows you to do is take loads of data, bundle it into one transaction, and then upload that transaction, right? And this gets us to a point where you can arbitrary scale Arweave. So there is a number, but like it's the kind of number where it's like larger than the number of atoms in the known universe. So in theory, like there is, pretty big. Like should be able to, if you've got some video files, I'm sure we'll be able to handle it, Neil.
Fit them in there, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very good. So what do you think, like just because we're talking about data and also privacy, do you guys see, and again, maybe this is a question anybody can answer if you have a good answer for it, but I'm just curious about the balance between privacy and data access, you know, where we're talking about like a data-rich Web3 future, basically, where, you know, when I tend to imagine it, like my brain goes big all the time. So I'm thinking like everything is Web3. It's very seamless and it's just part of what we now call the internet, payments, etc. So what do you guys see as the challenges in that balancing that privacy and data access?
Yeah, in our case, like Arweave was originally built to be this kind of like forever for the web, right? So its original thesis didn't really think too much about privacy of data stored. It wants to solve the problem of long-term storage. It wants to solve the problem of like broken links on websites and like 60% of websites disappearing really, really fast. And kind of like sovereign data in the world, in a world where data gets deleted all the time. But the protocol itself it doesn't have an opinion about what you store there, right? So it's very common for us to receive requests for, we want this quality of permanent storage, but we also want this quality of privacy, right? So what we do is we work with partners like maybe URnetwork could be one. We've worked with Nilian and Lit Protocol and others to kind of provide that flexible encryption, decryption, and access control layer for the data stored on Arweave. People are always going to need that, in my perspective. I think that the challenge is about, if you really, to kind of like Jinx's point in your conversation earlier, if you really want to decentralize the whole stack, solving that problem in a decentralized way is quite tricky. Like, to be able to, I've stored data privately, I want to grant you, Neil, access to be able to see that data, but I also want to be able to revoke that access. That on a technical level is quite a challenging problem. It's solved with different implementations, but it's not easy. Right. But I think more and more, we're seeing more use cases where people are like building like append-only data structures on Arweave from their protocol, especially in Deepin, so they can then use that as like a data lake to sell access to that data. But if you're selling access to that data, if all of it's free and publicly available, you kind of lose some of the value, right? So there's a balance, I think, for us, but for sure, I think there's always going to be that need for private data, but it can be quite a tough technical one to solve.
Yeah, that makes sense, because permanent and changing your mind about something later, like revoking access, those two things are sort of contradictory to each other.
You've got to get your design right up front with permanent data. If you get the design wrong up front with permanent data, it can be a bit difficult, but patterns are pretty well established now, and we can help figure that out.
I'm just going to add on to that real quick and just say that it's actually much easier to have sovereign data for yourself than it is to start creating group access and control structures. That suddenly becomes a complicated software engineering problem.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I think about the amount of times I've worked with projects over the years where even just smart contracts, which, you know, when you're launching a token, you're pretty much saying like, there it is. You know, you kind of can't go, oh shit, we made a mistake. You know, quick, pull back those tokens and let's reissue the smart contract. It just, you know, you have to be careful. You have to be really careful. And I think in a world of like build fast, or, you know, build and break fast and fix and iterate, it's kind of, yeah, those two things are kind of opposite as well. So yeah, one is interesting.
One view that we have as well is only allowing encrypted data into the network. That's we feel like that's one of our key principles of running a safe network for the users is we look at the protocols in and make sure that they are themselves running some kind of end-to-end encryption. And so we think that mitigates the risk of our network storing and analyzing data. We're focused more on ephemeral data, creating encrypted channels between two parties. And we put effort into actually making sure that the protocols in are encrypted. And so that's sort of one of our foundations of user safety.
So is that encryption wrapped in encryption?
Yeah, basically double. Yeah, actually 3 layers now.
We're Russian doll of encryption.
Yeah, we're looking at post-quantum, which is like a new layer.
I was just gonna. That was actually my next question. Was like, how much risk are we in for quantum? Like, you know, quantum is the kind of sizzly term at the moment, but like, is encryption going to be laid bare essentially when quantum comes, or?
Yeah, I think it's a weird state. I'll just state quickly what we see. It looks like a weird state where the internet generally isn't supporting post-quantum. And if you support post-quantum, you look different. In our space, we don't like users to look different because users who look different get singled out and blocked. And so what we try to do is that on our outer layer look like just normal generic web traffic. And I think the web generally has a real upgrade issue. Like most of the internet is still running HTTP 1.1. I mean, even though, you know, H2, H3 have been out, it's still mostly just the old standard protocols, especially as you look globally. And, you know, the encryption generally, you know, there really isn't a standard post-quantum TLS encryption today. And so what we've been looking at is working with partners. Like we've been looking at a partner called Rosenpass in the EU, but they can actually embed post-quantum within a TLS session. And so sort of like you have to kind of look at your risks, like who's the most threat. And so that solves the threat of ISPs and, you know, surveillance on the internet, but it doesn't necessarily solve the issue of participants capturing and analyzing data. And so, you know, it's kind of a hybrid solution today where you can mitigate some risk, but you can't mitigate all post-quantum risks until fundamentally the internet adopts a post-quantum standard.
So what happens when Grok 7.9 or whatever gets capability of through all these colossus or data centers and gets access to a quantum data center, you know, and it's just determined to break all encryption? Like, is that, this is probably a really dumb question, but is that a reality that we should be scared of, or are we going to fix that before it's a problem? Do you guys think?
I guess I'll just speak and stop talking, but our general approach is that we want to distribute traffic across the entire network. So we have a number where we look at how much data each participant is getting. We try to make that relatively even. We think that that's probably one of the best strengths of a decentralized network, is the risk that, you know, how many actors are bad versus good in the network. And so, you know, generally we're trying to scale to millions of nodes and distribute traffic evenly across millions. And we think that that's actually a strength, where even if you have some bad actors, you know, they might not, you know, be able to capture all the data. And so that's the strength of decentralized networks today.
For sure. What do you think, Jinx?
Kemp's already unmuted. Let him roll.
I was just going to say, we have a pretty similar philosophy, right? We don't know the future. I'm generally pretty optimistic that humans will solve these problems. And I don't know how much it's good to talk about, but yeah, I'm pretty optimistic that we will solve it. URnetwork, similarly to Brian, like, to build decentralized systems, you need to kind of get to some kind of scale and geographical distribution, so you can resist these issues or these bad actors that might come into play, and then kind of build to the protocols of the web, and hopefully that the protocols of the web, in my optimistic frame, sort of catch up, and then we could just build to those protocols. But Arweave itself doesn't really care or think about encryption and decryption, so we can adopt whatever the latest standard is for encryption and decryption for new data really quickly. Old data is a different matter, but I'm pretty optimistic that we'll get there.
All right.
And I'll say, you know, Kemp mentioned earlier a word that I think is really important, which is opinionated and not being opinionated. I think a lot of times especially people who are kind of newer to big data architecture and decentralized architecture in particular, are not familiar with some of the old school concepts like the OSI model. And most of these protocols should be lower on the OSI model. They should not be making opinionated decisions about how the data is used or what the data contains or any of the rest of those things. They should be data agnostic. And so the problem of, is the data encrypted well enough, functionally should be owned by the applications that are creating and sending that data. You know, Signal is really great about that, because they have this ability to, you know, at the application layer, they're encrypting the data, and then they have they give the user a choice. Do you want to use the main Signal network? Do you want to use a proxy relay? How do you want to send it? That's the application is agnostic about that front. And at Pocket, you know, any type of data, gRPC, JSON, RPC, we don't care. You can send it through the network. We don't care what it is. Now, as Brian, I think, mentioned earlier, and Kemp as well, there's nothing that prevents a participant on the network from sniffing that data, looking at it, seeing what's coming across its node or whatever else. And that will always be a risk. But if you are properly encrypting your data before you send it, then it doesn't matter.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense.
I think the other point that's important, and you touched on this earlier, Neil, is like when you deploy a smart contract, hopefully you get it right the first time, right? And then also that, along with the idea of like a fat versus a thin protocol, like the more you try and stuff into one solution, the more surface area there is for you to do it wrong, right? So it's in my view, and it sounds like Jinx and Brian are kind of aligned, it's better if like individual teams, like we focus on URnetwork on the storage and access of permanent data, URnetwork focus on VPNs and private transit of data, and Jinx and Pocket are focusing on kind of enabling access to like this RPC layer for blockchains. If we try to solve all of that problem ourselves, we're probably going to mess it up at some point of the stack. So you keep the protocols thin, follow like the web standards, and I think that's how we kind of like almost like Lego brick create these systems in a more sort of secure and redundant way.
Yeah, that's you make an interesting point actually, because about interoperability. There's a lot of different blockchains, a lot of different layer ones out there now. Unbelievably, it feels like unbelievably to me, people are still launching new ones all the time. I don't know. Like, do you feel that interoperability is a blocker, or do you think that progress is only made by improving on what's gone before? So therefore, we need new chains that are doing new things, and actually we're moving forward, not moving backwards by getting broader. I'm talking as an ecosystem as a whole. I'm interested to hear what you guys think about interoperability and data in particular. That's a question for anybody who wants to take it. Do you think it's a good thing?
I'll jump in here.
It's a problem?
On this one, I think. I honestly, I don't think that there's any problem at all with having millions of chains. I think that there's a strong argument to be made that blockchain was complicated and heavy and weighted, back in 2013, right? And Bitcoin was the only network out there that was capable of working on these things, and that the ability to create and deploy blockchains has gotten much, much easier in the last decade and change. And I don't see any reason at all why there shouldn't be custom purpose chains that are spun up easily with low resources that meet a very specific need. I think Base is a good example of building a blockchain around your own ecosystem, that supports the things that you are looking to incorporate within your own exchange-driven environment, and building onto that. Giwa from Upbit is a good example of building a blockchain that is custom tailored to local language developers. There's not a lot of documentation out there in Korean, so they are taking that on and saying, hey, here's how to become a blockchain developer with resources that are actually made for you, right? And then you've got platforms like Canopy, for instance, which are like, hey, if you want to spin up a blockchain for your dog club and record, give out POAPs for every person who attends, fine. Here's an easy, low-cost way to do that, which requires very little technical expertise. And I think we start looking at blockchains themselves as sort of standalone apps, and look how apps were at the beginning versus now you can use an app builder for $5 a month that makes it dead easy for anyone to spin an app up. I think blockchains are very much going to work towards being that same way.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's no question that the tooling is a lot better now than like it was certainly when I joined. And I mean, with AI and Cursor and applications like that, Claude, I mean, vibe coding, it just really does blur the line between, someone who's studied computer applications in college for 4 years and someone who just has an interest and wants to get stuck in and is willing to spend the hours needed troubleshooting to try and figure out why their code doesn't work, yeah, that's, I don't know. I like where your head's at. I wonder, do we ever get to a point with completely decentralized, completely permissionless tech where like you say, blockchains are just the basis, just the foundational layer of any application. Is it even necessary though? I mean, in a lot of cases, chains are great for adding incentives, obviously. But as someone said, and it annoyed me when he said it, I was at this fintech conference here in Ireland, and the guy said he was a lawyer. And when people say it was the worst, he was a stereotype of the absolute worst type of lawyer there is. Like just clueless about some of the things he was saying. But in any case, the guy had said like most of Web3 is just a problem in search of, or a solution in search of a problem, which I thought didn't really resonate with a lot of the Web3 that I've seen and been part of, thankfully. Yeah, I don't know. Do we need layer ones for everything? I mean, I guess not. Web2 worked fine before blockchain came along. But maybe not if you really believe that everything needs to be permissionless and decentralized.
I don't think everything needs to be, but I kind of see the world, particularly capital, follows laws of like physics, right? So decentralized, and what I mean by that is decentralized systems in one way are the only way to solve certain problems, and eventually they become the best way to solve them as well, because you can reach economies of scale that are just better than what you can in centralized entities. It takes a long time, but when you get there, you get there. So I don't necessarily think everything should or has to be decentralized. And there'll always be this kind of like chicken and egg game between centralization and decentralization. But I think over the arc of time, we, assuming we don't get stopped by regulators in some like a really aggressive way, I hope to see us kind of like progressively decentralize most things. So we've done money. We're kind of still working on infrastructure now, I think. Like, I'm not sure anyone's fully cracked like decentralized like EC2, like AWS hosting, for example. But we're eating away at it, because once you figure it out, the product and the cost is just better. So I think it will happen, but it doesn't necessarily need to be decentralized. It kind of depends on which way I think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the democratization, and I hate to use that term because it's become such a cliche, but the democratization of the wealth that can flow through these systems, as opposed to being, and this is why I jumped at the opportunity to get involved with Havelo, was because this idea that you could democratize, and it's kind of a socialist idea, which I'm not in any way, just to be clear, but yeah, this idea that people could actually, contribute whatever they have and get a little piece of the pie, versus, Jeff Bezos just buying another giant yacht. Yeah, I don't know. Something about that appeals to the romantic in me, the person who thinks about the world being a better place.
I'll add on that a solution in search of a problem was probably an accurate criticism 5 years ago. But in the last 5 years, if you haven't seen the problem and you don't understand what the solution is, then you're probably not the customer for this kind of service anyways. When we've got major social media platforms able to completely shut down a message with the flick of a switch, when you've got major service providers like the largest CDN in the world, whose name I won't mention because I don't want to get sued, who can decide to shut off access to your data, your website, whatever it is, with the flick of a switch. All of these, when you've got governments who can send orders to these platforms saying, make sure this person doesn't get heard, that's the problem. You've got, countries that firewall complete network resources, just you cannot get through them, right? And China and Iran and some of these other places where you go there and your internet is effectively shut off. And that's part of the reason that signal proxy relays became so important, was you could literally pass an IP address around among your friends, and now you can all connect to Signal and chat with each other in a way that is hard to detect and hard to block. and that keeps your access going. That is the problem that's being solved by Web3. No matter what the access is, whether it's permanent storage, whether it's privacy browsing through the internet, whether it's access to chain data and other types of open public data, Web3 is the only solution to that. Centralized providers cannot guarantee that access, and they are all at risk of instant shutoff, and you have no recourse as that data creator and distributor.
Yeah, 100%. Very well said.
One of the, just kind of jumping in on the chain issue, one of the biggest issues that we've seen with the chain is it powers our incentive layer, and the transaction fees is very important. So the transaction fees, the ability to have cheap transaction fees, that is directly proportional to the size of the network, how large the network can scale, because there's only so much to go around, right? If it gets all eaten, if you have 1 million participants and everyone's paying a transaction fee, it adds up quickly. And the ability to keep the payments on chain with cheap transaction fees, that directly impacts the ability to scale a utility token, especially as like a US company. It impacts the need to do KYC. It impacts tax filing requirements. And so, the ability for a chain to be able to support peer-to-peer payments and low transaction fees, I think is essential to be able to run an effective incentive layer. And so when we've looked at chains to partner with and to use, we've looked at it from the incentive perspective, and can we actually run this as peer-to-peer payments with low transaction fees? We've also looked at where the users are, and so we want to be where the users are and make it easy for the users. And so we look at working with all the largest chains. We started on Solana, but we've actually moved over to we just are launching on the new ETHOS device, and so we're looking at supporting multiple chains.
Why the change from Solana?
It's not a change. It's an and.
It's okay. All right.
Like we want
multi-chain. Let's go.
Multi-chain, exactly.
Very good. Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of the data layer. That's like one thing of like interoperability between all of these chains for like moving assets. At the data layer, though, like all of these chains can share the same data layer. So, private transfer of data in URnetwork and providing access to blockchain data in Pocket Network, and for us, just permanent storage. Like, it doesn't really matter what L1 or L2 or whatever they're doing. Like, as long as we all follow similar standards, then at the data layer, the interoperability is, I think, okay. And then it may be a bit of an open question for interoperability between blockchains themselves. But again, I'm pretty optimistic that we'll solve these things, and like the market will force us in one direction or another.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, in the last even 5 years, but 10 years, certainly the level of change, the speed of change, and the level of tech that's being built is just incredible. It's mind blowing, the complexity of some of the deep in networks, and what they can do, like to guarantee data security, or to not even security, but just to guarantee that your data is just still going to be there. With redundancy, like that whole thing with Arweave. Yeah, Arweave is a fascinating project.
A lot of what we find is a lot of people don't care about these things until they have to care about them. So it's like we're all out here building this stuff, and we know that it's important, but like until someone gets like rugged or loses their stuff, or their data gets leaked, or they can't get a transaction through, like they don't care, and then all of a sudden it's like the most important thing in the world.
Yeah, that's true. It's a limit of human psychology thing, I guess. All right, what do you guys think is the most exciting thing that we all have to look forward to in the space, in the data space of Web3, or just in the Web3 space? Is there anything exciting that's coming down the track that you're aware of, either in your own projects or just on the broader?
I can just add, I think the new devices coming out are really exciting for me. I feel like we've been in a kind of a duopoly for 10 years plus of Android versus iOS. It's kind of not been very interesting from a builder because, you know, it's kind of like you play to two stores and you follow two different models. I think it's really interesting. There's a ton of new devices launching, especially in the Web3 space. I'm actually tracking four of them, and just this year. And so I think that that's really exciting to get, you know, physical devices into people's hands that are alternative, because I think, I mean, Steve Jobs said it once, which is like, you know, it all starts from the device, right? Like if you have a device that's with an ecosystem that you can actually build new things on, new things can actually reach end users. And that's really exciting from my perspective.
Yeah, it's the window in. So what are the other, I'm aware of Solana have their device.
So we're ETHOS, the DGen 1. There's an Ethereum device. There's also the Solana Play device. It's like a gaming device for Solana. And then there's also the Jumbo. So the Jumbo is a kind of like a mass market device, and all four are really interesting. And I'm probably leaving some out too. And if anyone's building a device and would love to add a VPN on it, I would love to be in touch. So please reach out on X.
Yeah, and for whatever it's worth, if you're out there building a device, reach out to us as well. I'd love to do a deep in coffee hour about devices. That'd be great. Jinx, Kemp, do you guys have any thoughts on exciting stuff coming down the line?
Yeah, I think for us at the moment, we're pretty excited about, there's a couple of things. We're pretty excited about X402 as like a standardized way for machines to pay for stuff and talk to each other to pay for stuff. You can pretty much, why? Because it's much easier to create decentralized networks if everyone is paying for stuff using a common format, right? Or a common standard that is built into the web. Because in that scenario, each project just implements the same standard once, and then everyone can use it, right? Versus everyone rolls their own solution that has its own quirks for how you accept money or you don't.
Right.
It creates a much better world for that kind of machines paying each other. So we're quite excited about that. You can pay for access of X402 from our URnetwork gateways now. We will be paying for storage, hopefully in the next couple of days. And then the other thing that we're quite excited about at the moment is storing structured append-only data sets on Arweave, right? So Arweave's permanent. So it can be difficult to kind of build a structured data set on that model. So what we've been working a lot on is providing tooling and guides for folks to be able to design their architecture in a way where you can just continuously store data using this architecture, and you create this like big data set that's really easy to pull into traditional systems. And historically it's been possible, but it's never really been encouraged. So we think that this is super useful for everything from archiving blockchain data to research data, AI data, deep in data. It allows it to plug into the systems that like you use in AWS or you use in any kind of data warehouse. So we're quite excited about those two in particular.
Cool.
And honestly, for me, I think the fact that we are reaching a certain stage of maturity in the decentralized Web3 space is probably the most exciting for me. Being an OG guy who, you know, in the late 90s, you would have to spin up a web service, then find a database and spin that up, and then, you know, all these different pieces, and then maybe have a CGI bin Perl application to provide some interactivity, right? And then, you know, by the mid-early 2000s, we progressed to the degree that you would have a one-click installer that would set up your entire web host account and install WordPress or, you know, something else. I think most of us OGs were using like Softaculous or some similar system that was just like magical, because instead of all these individual things, you just had like a single installer that handled all of that. And as we're seeing the tooling around each of these, like Ario is a great example of a layer on top of Arweave that is providing this sort of advanced engineering tooling that makes it all easier. And you're not just trying to do like command line staking type stuff. Moving into what is actually a mature user experience for developers is sort of the last stop into moving into a mature user experience for end users. And UX for end users in Web3 has been just trash for years now. So finally getting to a place where we can start seeing those really well-developed and easy to use applications combined with more devices that are agnostic and that are capable of using all of these decentralized tools. Now you have both sides of the equation done. You have builders who have the tools to easily build applications that reach end users that are able to easily interact with all those applications, and big love to, DeFi Kingdoms and a lot of early projects that helped bring this concept to end users in a fun way. We need the rest of that happening now. And I think we're starting to see the tide turn in that direction.
Yeah, I think so as well. It definitely seems the conversations, at least that I have with people in the space, are a lot more sophisticated now and a lot more aware of the fact that we need to grow beyond just the sort of the early adopters, the digital kind of, well, what we were calling digital natives, I suppose, back in the 2017 era, when it was kind of like, yeah, if you couldn't fix your own computer problems, you probably weren't going to become a degen and start like, gambling in the crypto casino. So yeah, I mean the completely legitimate centralized token purchasing websites. But yeah. All right, guys, I think we've reached the top of the hour. This has been a really fun conversation. I've really enjoyed chatting to you all. Maybe if you all want to just tell everybody where they can find out more about what you're working on and where they can get involved, where they can join the community, etc. We will share links to everybody's profile anyway, but just maybe if there's any way that you want people to get involved, and if you have any final words. Brian, do you want to go first?
Sure. Website UR.io. I realize it's very similar to AR.io, which I love. We should definitely talk about that. And join us on Discord. That's where our community is. Or X is yo_UR_network. And yeah, looking forward to chat on Discord. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Kemp?
Yeah, for sure. It's quite funny, Brian. I hadn't noticed that. So ours is AR.io network, the same as the tag under my next to my name. So it stands for Arweave in and out. Join our Discord for sure. I really like to speak to as many builders as possible. So if you're doing anything that needs decentralized storage, especially in DeepIn or AI, please reach out to me directly on Twitter or X. The handle's the same. I'd love to have a chat.
Thanks, Kemp.
Thanks. And we are, of course, at Pocket.network or on X as POKT Network. We are primarily looking right now for partnering with foundations and chains. One of the simplest ways to decentralize access to your data, whatever it is just run a Pocket node alongside your data source. And if you're looking to decentralize access to your data source, we have foundation programs that can help kickstart that for you and get the ball rolling far more cheaply than any other option that you have for that, guaranteed. So please feel free to reach out.
Amazing.
Absolutely join our Discord.
Okay, save yourself some money. Sounds good. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today. And thank you, all of you. We have nearly 4,000 on the stream now, so thank you all for tuning in to this, another episode of the DeepIn Coffee Hour, where we talk decentralization and technology in the future. If you haven't tried Havelo yet, go to havelo.com, download the app. It's really simple, 3 clicks, you're up and running, and you can claim your piece of the Web3 DeepIn pie, as it were. So we're just a aggregation orchestration layer to all of this technology, but if you're on Havelo, you'll get the best networks very easily plugged into your system for whatever your hardware is. So encourage everybody to go check that out and try it out. It's free to use. So yeah, you'll be up and running in minutes. So that's it for us today. A huge thank you to all of you who tuned in. And as always, we'll be back again next week, same time, same place, or same 8 places, I think, we're streaming to at the moment. And even after we're finished that, if you missed it because you had a dentist appointment or something juicy like that, by all means, tune into Spotify. We're up there as well, or iTunes or wherever. Basically, this show is everywhere. Just search for Deep in Coffee Hour. All right, guys. Thanks very much. See you next week. And in the meantime, be kind to each other out there.